Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey. So, here we are on site again. So they're putting the roof on plot 9. So, obviously you can see the crane. So should we head up there?
Yep.
Sweet. Obviously, as we're walking past, you can see this is one of the 3 basements that they've just prepped. They've got to dig a hole for where the sump pumps are going. So you can see those sort of steel cages over there. There's one for each, and that's basically this sort of concrete well where the sump pumps go, so that if any water did get into the basement, it travels around this perimeter drain under the floor and then goes into the sump, and then it just gets pumped out. These basements are very complex from obviously the way they used to do them. You've got sort of waterproofing elements on the outside, then the concrete walls, and then internally you've got other waterproof materials that feed into this perimeter drain and the sump, and it's all part of the waterproofing system, which is very expensive.
What plot is this?
This is plot 3. So they haven't done 4 yet, and then 5 they have done. So 5 looks just like this. They've also sort of taken the levels, reduced the levels to what we need, because obviously this is only half a basement, so the rest of the plot is just on a slab on grade. Yeah, so carry on. Just getting the roof on plot 2, and they're doing the dry stone wall. I think they're doing a nice job, because obviously with this being a more traditional barn conversion, we didn't want the concrete exposed, which is the retaining wall. So we basically in the end decided this was probably the most cost-effective way of doing it, and was most appropriate for a barn conversion. And I think it looks pretty nice. So they're sort of probably about halfway done, and then we'll put a little capping stone on top that'll go across both the concrete and the dry stone, just to keep water from penetrating. And then we've got some Siberian larch on the back side of this, which will just sort of make it a little bit more private, but not completely closed off. I don't know if we can see around. Well, so in this unit, we've got to insulate above and between the rafters. So I think there's 70 mil above and 70 mil in between the rafters. So the roofers put the first element on, and you can see looks like they've got the first couple of helices in there, and they've insulated. They've got the roofing felt on and the battens to take the slates. We'll point the top 3 courses so that they can get the gutters installed as well. Is that good enough for you?
It's good enough for me, yeah.
I think we're pouring the garage and the rest of the floors in plot 8. This crane driver is one of the best. Just a one-man band. Richard Swires. Everybody that's used it and loves them, and they're cracking on. Because none of the purlins were in. I mean, it's only 10 o'clock, so in 2 hours they've got a lot of big purlins in. Actually, that may be the last purling to go in which case they're gonna start putting the panels on, which would be interesting to see. I wasn't here last time they put them on.
So this is the last stage of the SIPs on this house?
Pretty much. Well, the last sort of structural stage, and then they've got to put this membrane. Now, most of these a lot of these membranes that they use them because there's another outside layer. There's another wall that goes on the outside of the SIPs. So it's not exposed to the elements once that exterior wall gets installed. So it can be stone or brick veneer or whatever. But in our case, because we're using Siberian larch, and it's we've got gaps in it, it's open, it's meant to be an open facade, we need it to be much more robust. And it has to be black with very little writing, if any, and I don't think I can see much, because there are little gaps, obviously, where you will see it. So it just needs to look dark, black. So yeah. This unit is very similar to this unit, roughly the same size, but the internal layout is a bit different. There was a couple of things that we picked up on this plot that we passed on to the contractor, the installation contractor on this, and I can see they've already introduced those. So just making sure how we kind of install this membrane in particular, how it gets taped, how it gets folded into the reveals, and just them spending a little bit more time making sure that it's right will make it easier for us in the next elements that we do, which is the cladding and that kind of stuff. So I'm glad they've already picked up on that. Actually, you can see something that we changed. We added something to this one, but we could only add two of these windows that look down into this vaulted living, dining, kitchen space because it was an afterthought and there's a lot of structural elements in the way. But on plot 9, obviously, we knew about that, and we changed that so that we could install, or basically put in 3 windows, which I think looks a bit better. So if you have a look in there, you'll see at first floor level. Yeah, so and the steel worked a bit better in here, and I can already tell from just how close everything is lined up in terms of the SIPS panels to the steels, and it looks really, really tidy. It worked on the last one, but it was a little bit harder. We had to address a couple of things. It didn't quite work out the way we hoped they would, and in the end it does, and the buyer doesn't notice the difference, but it's made it easier for us on this occasion just to work on that. So that's already by the second plot, we've already worked out a lot of the snags, and yeah, I'm pleased with it.
So how's it all going then, out of 10 at the moment?
Out of 10, I'd take 1 mark off for 1 point off for the fact that it's going slower than we would like. I would probably take another point off for the fact that part of going as slow as we are because bank financing is very tricky, just because the banks have lent a ridiculous amount of money to all the businesses in England via the government loan scheme. So they're just slow and somewhat reluctant to lend to developers at the moment. But what it meant for us is basically we're just using a lot more private finance. But by that I mean ourselves. We're having to put our own cash in. So I guess, yeah, 8 out of 10. Isn't bad.
So what's going on in number 7 then? Is there any developments, interiors that we...
Yeah, well, let's go have a look. Oh yeah, so they've got ready with the first roof panel. Come on in. Well, this is something we had to change in one of the SIP constructions, which is basically where the manifolds are going for the underfloor heating. We didn't really want to have sort of things boxed out from the wall. There's a bathroom on the other side, so there was another false wall on the other side which would hide all of the pipework and everything. There was space to where we could effectively recess the manifold into the bathroom, but it's obviously just in the false wall, and that's what they've created here. But because it was in this structural element of the SIPs, we actually had to go back to them and say, right, what can we do and what do we need it to make it look like? So that's why they added some extra vertical legs and then this header, just to make sure the weight is distributed properly. But the SIPS designers are really good about doing that, finding little solutions for us so that we can make little changes to the structure without messing with the integrity. Still not sure what we're doing as far as staircase in there, but this staircase we have, well, partly again because we've got to, we're going to hide one of the manifolds underneath here. It'll create a bit of storage as well. We've made a fairly simple staircase, which will either get tiled. The stairs will either get tiled or carpeted. There will be a solid balustrade here as well. We could have put a timber staircase in here, but I like it when it's really solid. I hate squeaky staircases. And I mean, you should be able to do a timber staircase and not have it squeak, but there's no chance of this squeaking. But that again is another rainy day job for them to carry on with that, which is probably Wednesday. And that, you can see, that's a special bracket that you wouldn't normally be able to do that on this joist. You'd have to be, I don't know, 600 away from the end. But we had something that we needed to do. And I'm not sure why there's one. Oh no, I know why there's one there. It's because that was how they were able to feed. They needed to feed the pipe through. So the hole is not for anything anymore. But if you can imagine, you've got a bunch of joists. We'll go in here, I'll show you. You've got this pipe, which is picking up a bathroom on this side. But we needed to tie it in with the one waste point, which is on the floor already. And they've got this, you have this long section of pipe, if you can imagine. There's no way to put that in unless you could slide it from the outside where it's open. But that again was a solution that SIPS came up with. Yeah, so that worked out really well. In fact, again, this wasn't really on the plan. We just had to come up with a solution. And we talked about a couple of different things, some of which might have meant, creating an additional boxing in. In a lot of houses, this might have been out here, and then they would just put a box around it. And everybody knows what that is. That's, to me, that sort of thing's unfortunate because it just feels like you didn't plan ahead to try and hide that. And in some traditional buildings, obviously you can't because they're block, so you have no choice. That's the great thing about timber is that you've got a lot of options for hiding pipes and cables and all sorts. No, that's just all of the Velux windows that we can't yet put in until we get the roof sorted, which is unfortunate. And that's probably the elements on plot 7 that we obviously that will be the first time of doing them is the cladding, the roof, and the Veluxes. And these are going to be kind of tricky because there are 3. There's a vertical Velux window and then 2 on the roof, but one obviously is installed in the SIP wall, and the other 2 is in the SIP roof. And it's how the flashing detail for in conjunction with the Catnick roof. That's the thing that until we do it, basically Catnick and Velux have been discussing it between themselves about what's the best way to do it. They're going to do a combination of a flashing that they've just come out with from Velux and actually making some of the flashing out of the roofing material. So a combination of the 2. So again, that's going to be a tricky element that we have to get right from an aesthetic point of view, but more importantly from a weatherproofing point of view. I suppose something I've picked up on today, but it's probably true of pretty much any construction method, is it's really, you've got to have a good manufacturer, a good supplier, and you have to have a really good installer. If you don't have both of those things, you can run into problems, and requires a level of cooperation between both parties, rather than, and you can't get this where they're working against each other. They're always blaming each other because something's not, working right. It's the installer's fault. No, it's the supplier's fault. It's the manufacturer's fault. But these guys have worked for a long time for SIPs, so they're subcontractors to Clays. So obviously they know what they're doing. But even just like today, they found something that was causing them a bit of problem, partly because it is so accurate that when something is not cut as accurate as something else, they have to try and figure out how to make that work. And the roof is probably the hardest bit of that, because they've got to line the ridge through precisely, because everything sort of fits perfectly together at the pinnacle of the ridge. But it's because it's one piece. Obviously, it also has to line up perfectly at the eave. So down here at the eave, if it's slightly over the eave, it's actually protruding beyond the wall panel, and that causes those problems in terms of the installation of the gutters. And basically, we only have 100 mil to put the cladding and the substructure for the cladding. So if you can imagine, if that gets pushed out, that pushes everything else out. So it has to be super accurate. So if they find out that, one of the panels is 5 mil smaller, which, the tolerances for cutting this kind of stuff, they're small anyway. So it's not a problem with the manufacturer or the panels or anything like that. It's just one of those things they have to work with. So they'll just end up having to trim a little bit off. We're talking about 5 mil. But even 5 mil affects what we're doing later on. So yeah, that's why I would say not only do you want to make sure that the supplier is good, but obviously it's still only as good as the installer.
Very good. What's coming up next then?
Next, hopefully, as I mentioned before, I think is we need to get the roof on this. We want to get it cladded, get the velluxes in. Then we can drop the scaffolding, and we can start to work on the rest of the groundworks. And basically, we're just inside. And I think it gives our buyers then a very good idea of what their properties, what their own units are going to look like. Which I think everybody's anxious to see how that's going to turn out. But
all good.
So that's next time.
Bye.
So if you have a look in there, you'll see at first floor level. Or have you already seen it?
I'll get all the cutaways afterwards.
Oh, right. Okay.
Just focus on getting your voice.
Oh, right. Sorry.
It's all right.
I've ruined it now.